Good afternoon here from Los Angeles. Valerie Milano, the senior editor of the Hollywood Times and with Aspiring Magazine. And I'm so happy to have our guest with us today. We're going to be talking about the film, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Hollywood Times. My name is Sarah Solemani. I'm a filmmaker and I have written and directed a short film called Mashhad.
Yes, and I'm one of the lucky ones that's been able to see it. So thank you for joining us again. Many people may not know about Iran's secret Jewish community. What do you hope audiences will take away from learning about this hidden history?
So Mashhad is a city. It's the name of a city in the northeastern part of Iran, and it's a very religious city. It's the second largest city in Iran. It has a shrine of a very holy figure there that pe millions of people, over 20 million people, visit every year still. And it's also where my ancestors are from, and they lived as secret Jews. They had a forced conversion, and they had Islamic names. And then my grandfather went to the mosque and he learnt the Quran. He was actually very proud that he'd learnt the Quran. But secretly they were practicing Jews. And my hope for people in this very painful time in certainly Jewish, Palestinian, Middle Eastern life, is where possible just to expand and deepen our understanding of the region. And a lot of people don't know that the Jews of Iran were treated like this. And it wasn't just the Jews of Iran, Jews of Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen. There were forced expulsions in 1948. And so it's just my attempt to tell the story of my ancestors.
You're talking about this. This story is inspired by your own heritage. Can you talk about the moment you realized you had to tell this story?
Well, it was interesting because we grew up knowing that Bibi and Baba, like grandma and granddad, had these lives, but there wasn't much spoken about it because they were so programmed to be secret, and to not talk about it. And I just sort of thought that's what everyone's Jewish grandparents had this history. And then it was only relatively recently when um I wasn't very well, and I just sort of didn't know if I was going to live or die. And I had a doctor um come into a room and tell me if I was going to live or die. And my grandmother kind of came to me, and she'd been dead for many years, but sort of her spirit, if you like, was in the room. And she stood very still just behind me. And I was surprised. I found out I was going to live, and I had about a year kind of recovering. And I stared at one piece of wall with like a chipped wallpaper and a plug socket. And I just thought about her because I was surprised I'd thought about her because we never lived in the same country. We didn't spend that much time together. We barely spoke the same language, but she was the sort of presence in my time of crisis. And as I stared at the wall, I thought about her and what she went through, what my ancestors went through. And when I recovered, I had this sense of, as most people do, if they kind of look mortality in the eye, I just had this sort of sense that this could die, this history, if it isn't preserved and if it isn't told. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to bring the story to the world. And luckily, Reboot, the studios, and Noam and Adriana and Greg, our producers, just help bring it to life.
Yeah, because this film intersects with identity and geopolitics and faith. And, I think audiences too are so hungry for these kinds of stories right now. Moving on, how did you find your lead actress for Miriam, and what qualities were you looking for, especially since the role carries so much emotional weight?
The little girl, Arnica. So we had a big search. It was very hard to find someone in America who could speak Farsi who was a child. Not that many Persian families do carry on the language. And it was great to find her. And she was musical, and she could sing, and she could dance. And we were so lucky that we found her. I think my friend Tara Grammy, who's a big sort of Persian star. She did Persian's Got Talent. I think she put on her Instagram, and she helped me cast it. So we did a kind of call out. And then her dad, Alex, was just he became like we've credited him as a consultant on the film, and he helped with the translation, and he even played a religious guy on a stairway, even though he was like laughing that his friends are going to tease him because he's not a very religious person, and he was like dressing up. But we were very lucky to find all our cast went above and beyond for our sort of very short, very low budget film.
And talk about collaborating. You worked with an impressive team. I believe it's Christina Dunlap on cinematography. Is it Curtis Clayton on editing and Reboot Studios producing? How did these collaborations shape this story and the final vision?
Yeah, well, I just was very lucky that these people responded to the material, and they've worked with Christina, as you mentioned, who did American Fiction, and Curtis, who did all my favorite films, basically Gus Van Sant films, and Frank, who worked with Alexander Payne, who's our sound mixer. Just all these talented people responded to the material and helped me bring it to life. So I was a very lucky girl, I think. Sorry, I just lost your volume.
Sorry about that. Are they all here? Will they all be at the screening?
I hope so, yeah.
Okay, good. When you filmed in California, set the story in 1940s, right? Iran. How did you recreate that world authentically while still working stateside?
Well, first of all, we were lucky in finding the location, which is this set in Santa Clarita called Blue Cloud Ranch. And it's like a little Middle Eastern village that they shot American Sniper and The Old Man. So a lot of Middle Eastern films and TV shows there. And so we had to just recreate it's sort of 1930s, 1940s Mashhad. Um, but I didn't want it to feel very Western. So we had some photographs. There's not a lot of documentary footage, but I didn't want it to feel Western in any way. So the clothes are slightly more peasanty than they would have been. The hair is slightly more natural than it would have been. It would probably been a bit more set in my grandmother's childhood. But I wanted the sense that you're entering our world, our sort of version of Mashhad in the 30s and 40s, and the only sort of slightly Western look is at the end. I won't give too much away, but a beautiful actress, Mariam, and she's got a slight wave and a slight reddy hue and a little bit of lipstick, and it's the first time you see lipstick in the film, and it's kind of the promise of a new era that these Jewish people will finally escape Mashhad, and they will build new lives for themselves, and it's that promise that I wanted the audiences to end on.
You've been a long, advocate for female-driven stories. What does it mean to you to bring this particular female narrative to the screen, especially at a short fest like Holly Shorts?
Hmm. Um, it's funny. I don't think of myself as focusing on women. I just often just what is the most compelling story that I can tell, and so many women's stories have gone untold. So I almost feel greedy that there's this rich resource of story that I can access. For my grandmother, what means so much in telling this story is she was engaged at 12, my grandmother. And a lot of the Jewish girls were betrothed young because if the story was that if a Muslim man asked for your hand and you couldn't say no, you have to be betrothed already. So that was why they got engaged young. And she had her first child at 15, and sort of her whole life was child rearing. She had 7 children, one died in infancy. Um, but there's no mention of her as a wife or a mother in my film, even at the end when I kind of show photographs and talk about her life's journey. And she's a woman in the world. And for her to be immortalized in cinema, um, in a dimension that it has nothing to do with her mothering or being a wife, I think that means a lot to me. That means a lot to me.
Do you see Mashhad as the beginning of a larger exploration, maybe a feature or series or continuations of stories from this world?
Maybe, yeah, there's definitely a lot to explore, and there's a lot we couldn't capture that we wanted to. And um, as you said at the beginning of your interview, this is it's a story about religion as oppression and also faith as survival. And I think a lot about why my ancestors kept their faith alive and what it gave them, even though they were risking their lives, to light candles on Shabbat and to bake bread. And I think a lot about Islam as a faith of survival and why it's become the religion of the dispossessed and what it gives people. And so, especially in the West, especially in the progressive West, we don't look at faith as what it gives people, and how it carries people through hard times. So there's definitely a lot to explore, whether that's through a Jewish story or a faith story. I don't know. I'm an open book when it comes to things like that.
So, how can our readers and our viewers find out more about Mashhad, about you, about the film, social media or website? What?
Yes, everything's on my website, sarahsolemani.com, and Mashhad has a hashtag on social media, and we just look forward to meeting as many people and people seeing this film as possible. So thank you very much for your time.
Yes. We're the Hollywood Times today and aspiringmagazine.com. And our YouTube is the Hollywood Times official. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing such personal and powerful insight into Mashhad. And it does premiere at HollyShorts on closing night, October 16th at the TCL Chinese Theater. So everybody get your tickets. And thank you so much for being here and meeting you virtually. And hopefully we'll be meeting you at the Chinese Theater.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Have a great rest of your day.